Streaming live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and blasttheradio.com, this is The Lowell Green Show. The number to call and be heard around the world is 613-413-2217. Or email Lowell at blasttheradio.com. And now, here is Lowell Green.
I've got a question for our listeners and viewers. Do you agree with Doug Ford and his decision to leave the decision concerning mandatory vaccines up to the individual hospitals? He's getting some criticism from the usual sources for this decision. The decision not to impose a provincial law requiring all hospital medical staff in the province to be vaccinated. In light of the reality of the situation, I believe his decision not to impose provincial laws on this, but to leave it up to the individual hospitals and other health institutions, I believe this was the correct decision. I also want to point out that he made the decision after some very thorough studying and surveying of hospitals and medical authorities throughout the province. He was very anxious to find out if we impose mandatory vaccines on all hospital workers, how many workers will that leave you short? Can you do that, or will this place patient health at risk? So the decision not to impose provincial law was made after a great deal, I believe, of consultation, which is what most people in this province seem to want. I think that a lot of people don't understand. That doesn't mean that the hospitals themselves cannot and are not imposing mandatory vaccines. For example, here in Ottawa, I believe that all hospitals have imposed mandatory vaccines, certainly for those who are dealing with patients. As a matter of fact, my understanding is that about 180 employees, excuse me, have been laid off at the Ottawa hospital because they refused to be vaccinated. How many of those are actual frontline health workers and how many clerical staff maintenance, I don't know. So what Doug Ford has said, and there seems to be some confusion, I think, fed as usual by the media that doesn't tell the whole story. What he is saying is, look, I'm not going to impose a provincial law here. I am going to leave those decisions up to you, the various hospitals. And one of the reasons for this is that there could be communities, I don't know. Let's say the town of Powassan, Northern Ontario. I don't know if they have a hospital or not. But supposing that Powassan has a little hospital and they have had no COVID for the past 2 months. There's no sign of COVID anywhere in the whole Powassan area. They haven't had a problem, but they do find that, about 10% of their staff they would lose if in fact they impose mandatory vaccines. So they would have the right to say, look, you know what? We don't see any danger from COVID here. We don't want to lose 10% of our employees, so we're not going to impose mandatory vaccinations. I think that's a common sense decision. And not only that, but it also leaves the situation open where, if, for example, in the weeks or months to come in Powassan, there did crop up a serious COVID problem, they could still, on their own, impose mandatory vaccines. So I believe it's the right decision. I'd like to know your opinion on this. As I say, he's been, criticized the usual sources, but it just seems to me to be common sense, and good judgment to say, look, not only that, there's this. Who is in a better position to judge whether they need mandatory vaccines than the people who are there right on the scene, face to face with the employees? Or would you sooner have politicians down in the center of Toronto making the decision? Who should make the decision in Petawawa or in Renfrew or Powassan? Who should make the decision? People in Petawawa, Powassan, or the people at Queen's Park? I think he's made the right decision. And I also want to point out that you like it or not, excuse me, like it or not, you got to face reality. I mean, Quebec had to face reality. As you know, they tried to impose mandatory vaccines only to find out that if they did, they would be short so many people that it would place the lives of patients at risk, because there's a balance here. They would have to decide, listen, yes, if we have unvaccinated people in our hospitals, there is a risk. But what's a greater risk? If we lose 10 or 15% of our people, what places the patients at a greater risk? COVID or not having enough staff to serve them? Those decisions have to be made. And I believe that they can only be made at the local level. They know the situation. And that's what Doug Ford says. So I'd like your opinion on this. Do you agree with the decision that he has made here? I certainly do. I mean, there's absolutely no question that anybody with common sense today, after all the evidence we have, that they should be vaccinated, particularly if you're working in a hospital or long-term care facility. I mean, I simply don't understand people who believe some unnamed source from Upper Rubber Boot, Saskatchewan, who claims to be an expert on, I don't know, herbal medicine or something, why they would believe that person that vaccines are dangerous and not believe their own family doctor, nurses in their own community, a million or so doctors, health authorities, hospital workers around the world. Don't believe a million scientists or doctors, but believe this so-called health expert who believes that, the way to cure an earache is to blow smoke in it or something. I don't get it, but some people apparently choose to believe that. So you've got to face reality. And I believe that that's what Doug Ford has done here. I think he's walked a fine balance and done a good job. John, we got any comments on this as yet?
We absolutely do. Just compiling a lot of them right now. We will begin with Keenan, who says, I guess I am the usual sources. I work in human services, and we badly need a mandate for all of human services, not just hospitals. Where does this end? What about healthcare workers that don't want to wash their hands because it will interfere with their natural immunity? This is pathetic. Talk to the people who've been on the front lines fighting this pandemic and the waste of time and energy fighting thousands of individual battles with organizations because the province has refused to do their job.
Yeah, but just a minute. Is it up to the province or is it up to the individual hospitals? That's what that letter writer is ignoring. What Doug Ford is saying, look, individual hospitals have different individual situations. Look what happened in Quebec. They tried to mandate vaccines. They couldn't do it because they found that if they did, they would be short about 20% of employees, which would place the patients at greater health risk than if they were unvaccinated. The decision, I mean, in Quebec, for example, they tried to do it, and the hospital said, we can't do it. We won't have enough staff to serve people. So that it's not that if you want mandatory vaccines, the hospitals have the authority to do that, as they have done here in Ottawa. So don't blame Doug Ford. I think this is a mistake. It's not up to Doug Ford to make a decision on behalf of health experts in Ottawa or Petawawa. That's up to the health experts there. You can't shove all responsibility off onto senior governments, okay? There's got to be some responsibility. Local governments, local authorities. Goodness gracious, land sakes alive. Go ahead, John. More comments?
Yep. As a follow-up, Keenan says it is up to the province to lead on this and not just the hospitals. Dan says if
Disagree.
Okay. Dan says if they've been found to be safe, why no liability for manufacturers? We have Lori saying, I think as a patient, I should be able to ask if my caregiver is vaccinated. Then it's my choice. Donald says there are too many Facebook doctors. Craig says, in early July 2021, Israel reports the vaccine was 64% effective. By late July 2021, they reported the vaccine was 39% effective.
Oh, that's not good. Come on. Craig, please. You're a great guy, Craig, but give this up, okay? Get vaccinated. I mean, anybody with... I didn't want to deal with it anymore. I have no more patience left for that. The question is, who should have the authority to mandate vaccines? The local health authorities, the local hospital, or the province? How can the province make rational decisions on behalf of a Sudbury hospital? That should be up to the people in the Sudbury hospital. And as I say, it's got to be if you're concerned about patient health, the decision's got to be made. What places the patient at greater risk? Having an unvaccinated person in the hospital or not having enough staff to dress your wounds? Those decisions have to be made. Tough decisions. Unfortunately, I mean, if everybody agreed to get vaccinated, as they should, then there wouldn't be this issue. The issue is a few foolish people out there, misled, misguided people refuse to get vaccinated. That's what's causing the problems here. Don't place it all on Doug Ford, okay? Please. Go ahead, John, please.
We invite your calls, 613-413-2217. Another follow-up from Keenan. He says you do realize that hospitals are a really dangerous place for infections, right?
Let me point something out that does concern me. I didn't deal with this yesterday in my comments about the hospital. Do you realize, at least when I checked into the Civic Hospital, which is 2 weeks ago, that there are no questions asked of patients? Are you vaccinated? Not only are there no questions, but there's no testing. Okay, so some of you people are screaming at Doug Ford here, but should hospitals have to at least ask a patient if they're double vaccinated? And if they aren't, should they allow the patient in? Now, see, here's where some of you people, you civil libertarians, you have a problem with this, okay? So you say, well, everybody should be, all the staff should be vaccinated. Well, what about the patients? I'll tell you something. Maybe I shouldn't tell you this. Excuse me, but I am. In the space of about 4 days, I was in 6 different locations in the Civic Hospital. They couldn't find a bed. Couldn't find a room. They finally found a room for me late one night. They moved me up to the room. I was very pleased. There was one other person in the room. Washroom was right there. It was great. I almost cried with relief that I finally had a bed in a room. 15, 20 minutes later, the nurse came in. She's almost in tears. She said, Mr. Green, I'm sorry. You can't stay here. She said, we're going to have to move you again. Oh, yeah. So I finally worked it out of her. Why? Can I tell you why, John? Because they were afraid that the patient in the other half of the room have COVID.
Oh.
He was showing signs. Now, I don't know what happened. I questioned several times before what happened. Most of the nurses didn't think he did, but he was showing signs, and they could not leave me in that room. So this is the dilemma. It's not quite as simple. It's not quite as black and white as you say, well, the province should do this. Okay, if the province, you feel that the province, as some of you do, should mandate this, then what should the province do about patients? Should you allow unvaccinated patients into the hospital? Should you allow people who may have COVID into the hospital? Because very clearly this has happened. So I throw those questions out there, folks. These are very serious questions. Fortunately, because most people have used their common sense and their concern for others and got vaccinated, the number of COVID cases are beginning to fall. Thank God, because we've got responsible people. But these were some of the dilemmas that have been faced, that have faced our hospitals and other health institutions all along. It's not only the workers. What about the patients? And I ask you this, okay? Should patients be asked, have you been double vaccinated? And if they have not, should they be denied access to the hospital? Because I want to point something out. If a patient with COVID goes into the hospital, then essentially that whole ward has to be, I don't know. I mean, entire wards in the Civic have been shut down because somebody came down with COVID. So do you understand the dilemma here? I think a lot of people weren't aware of this. I had one woman, she got mad at me on Facebook, claimed, yes, they are. They're all tested before they can go into the Civic. They are not. There were no questions asked of me, and as far as I know, any other patient. Have you been vaccinated? No questions and no testing. So what should be done about that? Any comments on that one, John?
I actually have a question on that. You just twigged something in my brain. So, okay, you go to the hospital because you've got a broken hip. They take your health card, obviously. Would the fact that you're vaccinated actually appear? Like, could they look for that on the computer when they swipe your health card?
I don't see how. The health card doesn't bear that information. It's a good question. Some of the listeners may have the answer. I don't.
Yeah.
But all I know is that people with COVID have been admitted to our hospitals. not
Sure.
just here in Ottawa, but everywhere. That's why we have hospital breakouts. But people seem to think, well, the hospital breakouts are solely the consequence of unvaccinated workers. Wait a minute. Unvaccinated patients. And folks, I'm telling you the exact truth. They moved me out of that room because they were afraid that the other person in the room on the other side of the little screen had COVID. Whether he did or not, I do not know. Go ahead, John.
All right, we got a text here at 613-413-2217. I agree in part with Ford giving the hospital the decision, but I also think that healthcare workers directly dealing with sick patients should get the shot to be tested regularly.
So do I. Absolutely.
Certainly, there are remote areas that can relax mandate as long as they are smart and watch the COVID numbers in the area and take action.
But let me just rephrase that question. I agree. Everybody should be vaccinated, particularly those working in a healthcare situation. But if we are going to insist that the nurse be vaccinated, know that the vaccination, even double vaccinated, is not 100% proof, that you're not going to get it. So it's all very well say, well, the nurse has got to be vaccinated, but the patient doesn't. So in other words, the patient then can give it to the nurse, but the nurse can't get it. We got to be careful here. We have to understand the whole situation here, folks, because I don't know how you could, first of all, I don't know how you could refuse admission to a hospital of someone, even if they did have COVID. Or I just don't understand how you can't. And people have said that, well, you can't deny them. So then if you can't deny patients who are unvaccinated, but you can deny workers, something missing there. Go ahead, please, John.
Barb, I believe this is the first time you've commented. Thank you. She says, no offense, but where would unvaccinated patients go if they fall with a broken hip?
Well, they go to the civic hospital, where I went, but I'm vaccinated.
Lisa says, set up a hospital that is run by unvaccinated staff and allows unvaccinated patients. Of course, not realistic. She realizes that. Get vaccinated and use your head, says Clifford. Murray says, countries that have dropped the jab and let their God-given immunity to do the job. Okay. Let's get a word in for Shields.
Hold it.
Go ahead.
That last text is a display of absolute ignorance. The only way to obtain immunity from COVID is either to get vaccinated or get COVID. You're not going to get immunity to COVID from the air. Okay. The lack of medical knowledge, all you got to do, this information is available everywhere. You people who, I don't want to get into this again, I guess, but I just don't understand how so many of you out there can believe some kook who believes in marijuana treatment or smoking, I don't know, over millions, and I mean literally millions of doctors and scientists and nurses and healthcare workers and people who've had vaccination and had COVID. I don't understand how you can discount millions and millions of firsthand accounts and accept some we have no idea who it is on Facebook, but you agree with him. It's unbelievable. Shields, this you can believe, that these are good people in business since 1947, same company, same family, in the same location. Not too many businesses, even in the Ottawa Valley, can boast that. The reason that they have done so well is they do business the right way. They've got a huge warehouse. Yeah, the store itself on the main street there in beautiful downtown Pakenham is small, although they do have a very good display of appliances and a great little butcher shop, by the way. But they have a huge warehouse, so that almost, I'm 99% sure, whatever kind of appliance, color, make, brand, price range, it's going to be there, which can be delivered to your home in 2 or 3 days. No long wait. And you probably, you know what? You're probably going to save money. A lot of people think, I'm going to save money with the big box stores. Check it out, folks. Shields, SCHEELS.ca. There you'll see all of the appliances listed, very easy to find, the prices and the savings. Yes, John.
A comment from Hazel was at the Valley Hospital yesterday. No vax questions, even though they had proof already. We have a similar comment from Laura. A couple of comments from her, actually. She says, this is not the first pandemic. It's the first pandemic in this lifetime. Every single pandemic with records going back to the plague of deniers. The only thing that will happen if you wear a mask and get a vaccine, you'll stay healthy. She adds, visiting the emergency eye clinic last weekend at the Riverside, they asked me if I was vaccinated, had symptoms and made me change to a new mask that they provided. It actually made me far less nervous. Keenan's back to say, FYI, I totally appreciate Lowell's consistency on vaccines. I just don't think he's thought this all the way through. I'm not screaming at Ford for politics. I'm tired of dealing with this for 18 months and worried for the safety of the innocent.
Yeah, but can I tell you something? If everybody got vaccinated, this would be all over. The only reason this continues on and you're getting sick of it is because we got large numbers of people who refuse to get vaccinated. Come on. I have another topic here that I've got to throw out. Another question. In your opinion, I hope you have an opinion out there, how much of this global warming crisis, so-called, and the battle to fight it is actually really about the climate? And how much of it do you think is nothing but old-fashioned socialist attempts to destroy the capitalist free enterprise system? I'm beginning to suspect the latter. No question. Some environmentalists are really concerned about the environment and believe that the only way to save the planet is essentially shut down most of our major industries. But you know what? Increasingly, I think that it's not so much about climate, but it's about free enterprise. The fact is, most environmentalists are socialists. Come on, have a look at it. And most socialists want to replace the free enterprise system with, you guessed it, socialism. This is what happened in Venezuela. Venezuela at one point had one of the strongest economies in South America, one of the world's largest suppliers of oil. They elected a socialist government. He promised them free beer and it was unbelievable what he promised. They elected a socialist government. First thing they do is nationalize, take over the oil and gas industry. They destroyed it, and they have reduced socialist Venezuela to poverty status. Millions of people have had to leave Venezuela or starve. That's what socialism did there. You know, when the picketers show up to picket a pipeline or a railway or a business that's actually making money, many of the signs say we need a revolution, or words to that effect. Well, the revolution they're talking about is the replacement, the destruction of the free enterprise capitalist system with socialism. That's what they're talking about. Okay? Let's not fool ourselves. And you know, if you examine what's happening in Canada, that is exactly what is happening. The oil and gas industry is by far the major industry in this country, or has been. It employs, tens of thousands of workers, hundreds of thousands of workers, supplies about 20%, or did supply about 20% of our gross domestic product, which, pays for hospitals, education, $9-10 billion a year into the province of Quebec. We all know the story. Trudeau has made it very plain he wants to destroy. And not only Trudeau, but Elizabeth May, the Green Party, and many members of the NDP. They want to shut down oil and gas, our major employer, our major industry. I mean, this is what socialists want to do. They don't like businesses that make money. They think that everybody in business is a multimillionaire and he's hiding all kinds of money down in the Bahamas or something. And talk to the average socialist. Oh, yeah, the government should run everything. Well, as you know, in the case of Trans-Canada Pipeline, the government did buy it. It essentially expropriated it because they drove the private enterprise out. So this is, I believe, because let me just point something out here. You know, if you block a pipeline, you shut down the oil and gas industry in Canada. How does that help the environment? Because all we have to do is replace Canadian oil and gas with American, Saudi Arabian, Russian, and Venezuelan oil and gas. And many of those countries, including the United States, are producing oil and gas much less clean than Canadian. Canada now has developed one of the cleanest methods of scrubbing oil and gas production. It's one of the cleanest producers of gas and oil in the world today. So we want to replace the clean Canadian oil and gas industry with the dirty industry, blood money from Venezuela, United States. We're going to feed Joe Biden, and Russia. Oh yeah, we need to support them. and, of course, Saudi Arabia. Wow. So how does that? I mean, if we're not producing the oil in Canada, but they're producing it in the United States, down in North Dakota, just across the border, how the hell does that improve the Earth's climate? Come on, you environmentalists, explain this to me. All it does, I mean, all you're doing is replacing, you're shutting off a pipeline and bringing giant tankers across the Atlantic Ocean filled with Saudi Arabian oil. How does that help the environment? So this is not this is not about the environment, because shutting down oil and gas in this country doesn't help the environment. What it does is it advances the socialist agenda. Shutting down the Alberta oil fields will not help the world's environment, since all that will happen is that more oil and gas will be produced in the United States, Saudi Arabia, Russia, to replace the lost production here in Canada. So why are we doing this? Why are we attacking Alberta oil? It beats the hell out of me. And further evidence of this, okay? Further evidence that this is about socialism as much as the climate. Which country is the world's major emitter of CO2? Which country is the world's worst polluter? Oh, China. China. Does China have free enterprise? No. It's the epitome of a socialist country, a communist country. How many times was China and the problem with China? China wasn't even at the G20 session on global warming. China, hardly anybody is raising a peep of protest about China, the world's major polluter, but they're after us with the cleanest oil and gas in the world. Why? Because they don't like big industry. Socialists don't like capitalism. They don't like profit-making companies. Okay? Folks, I'm not making this up. Check the socialist agenda. See what they want to do. All right. John, we have time for a few comments here. Anybody wants to comment on this?
And we are busy with comments. Thanks, everybody. We appreciate it. And thanks for sharing this on your social media, too. It helps get word out that Lowell is back. Lisa says, socialists claim we're all horrible for our carbon footprints, yet they drive around in non-green SUVs and use jets for travel. Anne says, despite Trudeau's attempt to turn Canada into a socialist state, we are still a democracy and we have the power to stop him. We just need to find the will, and we need to get Parliament back to work, as the Liberals have been given a free pass.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. But I think that one of the things we need to do is understand what's really happening here. This move to shut down Alberta in no way is for the environment. It doesn't help the environment. Replacing Alberta oil with Saudi Arabia oil doesn't help the world's environment. It doesn't. And any damn fool knows that. So why are they doing it? Well, why shut down our number one creator of employment and revenue in this country? Why? Because it's part of the socialist agenda. Go ahead, John.
We need to start pushing that oil sands is basically a cleanup program. There are oil sands in Quebec that are poisoning the area. Comment on Twitch. Mike says 100% this is a scam and attack on our capitalist society. Lynn says it's all about the money. David, thank you for your comment. Global warming is turning into a tax grab and a publicity stunt. Jennifer, it's all part of the Great Reset, she says. Cheryl says...
Wait a minute. The Great Reset. What is the Great Reset? The Great Reset is change the capitalist system to a socialist system. That's the reset. And the sooner that more Canadians understand the real motivation here, the sooner we can fix it. Go ahead.
Another comment from Lisa. She says the Liberals are doing it because they're in bed with the NDP, who use this as their big platform. Let me see. Cheryl, yes, and it won't be long until we are just like Venezuela. Barb says there's no connection from government investments to oil and gas to what that affects to our environment. It's all a show, she says. Laura back in with another comment. She says, we do have problems with topsoil loss and pollution in emerging nations. The only reason why governments tax climate is because there's no other behavioral influence that they can come up with. Scientists are just now learning how the sun has a major impact on weather. Governments cannot.
Yeah, but come on, please deal with the issue here. How does shutting down Alberta oil and gas help the world's environment? Would someone please answer that for me? Deal with the issue here? Because that's what they're going to do. Trudeau has made it very plain that he wants, in fact, Elizabeth May has said this all along, and many others. They want to shut down Alberta oil and gas. How does that improve the world's climate? Go ahead, John.
Just one more comment. Actually, they're still rolling in. Here we go. Eric says, we have 3 major natural resource sources: water for hydro and water, softwood lumber, and oil. We are getting screwed out of all 3. And Lisa says it doesn't help it, what she's referring to there. I'm trying to catch up. Sorry.
Okay.
They're coming in fast and furious, Lowell. This is wonderful. We're getting great response to your show today.
Good
So
show.
Well,
We're out of time here, folks.
Yes, we are.
But I just wish that people would spend. I know that some of you do spend a little bit more time. Whether you agree or disagree with me, what I'm trying to do is start some thoughts here. And I would really appreciate it if more people would really look into this and start to think about it. Just ask yourself this question. Why do they really want to shut down Alberta oil and gas? Does it help the environment? How does it do that? How does replacing Canadian oil with Venezuelan oil, how does that help the environment? And if it's not to help the environment, what is it for? And what is the Great Reset? Is the real motivation here this Great Reset to change the capitalist system into socialist? And if it's not, how come China, the great socialist communist nation, gets off with hardly any criticism whatsoever? Thank you all. We'll be back tomorrow.
The Lowell Green Show is seen and heard live around the world at 2 p.m. Eastern. Connect with us online at blasttheradio.com/Lowell Green. Can't join us live? Download the Lowell Green podcast. Available on Apple, Spotify, Google, and more. Ask your smart speaker to play the Lowell Green podcast. This is a production of blasttheradio.com.